Okay, thank you everyone for joining today's joint webinar on effectively recruiting in a competitive market. My name is Amy Cretton and I'll be hosting the event today. And I'm joined by Richard Cummings, who is a strategic HR partner for our HR consultancy business within Moore Kingston Smith. Richard's team works with companies predominantly to improve efficiencies or company performance via their people. And this might be day-to-day issues such as performance management for an individual or absence concerns, to more transformational matters such as working with clients to become an attractive employer to the right candidates, building capabilities of a management team, or future-proofing the business and building succession. I'm also joined by Claire Sanders from Talented People. And the Talented People brand was established in 2014 by Claire as a response to the lack of service-focused recruitment companies in Sussex and the surrounding area. Talented People help managers and business owners to recruit the staff they need more effectively and work with a number of different sectors. And it's really important to the team at Talented People to take a partnership approach with their clients, taking the time to understand their pain points and to guide them to the best possible recruitment solutions. So we know currently that there are over 1 million live vacancies, and we know from experience that companies are finding it very difficult to recruit right now. So Richard and Claire will be sharing their knowledge and expertise in this area, providing tips on how to recruit most effectively from the day the job advert is posted and to beyond the offer. Please do feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. If I can just ask you to put it in the Q&A function rather than the chat, it just helps us keep track of it. The webinar will probably last about 45 minutes and will aim to end by around 10:45. So Claire, if we can start with you then, what's changed recently? Why are companies finding it so difficult to recruit at the moment?
There is some reticence for people to move from roles that they're in. I think with everything that's happened with COVID, there's also kind of Brexit floating in the background as well. And I think that depending on the type of role that you're recruiting for, there's also a skills shortage for some people that are recruiting at the moment.
Okay. Richard, one of the things that people are always trying to do when they're recruiting is to get the message out that they're a good employer. How do people do that? How do they go about it?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. If no one knows you're there and no one knows who you are, then they're not going to know whether or not you're a good or bad employer, really. And I think when we talk about this, and we've talked about this for a long time, we've always said why people want to work for Google and why do people want to work for Virgin? And they just have a very, very good brand. And there's perception, and not necessarily the reality, but the perception is that they're great places to work and there's loads of promotional opportunities and actually you're going to do fun and exciting work. So people want to work there, but as a, if you're an industrial estate with lots and lots of other companies, how do you stand out from everybody else? I think there's a few things that you can do, and one of them really is like Glassdoor, which is really well used now. And Glassdoor is a platform which is like TripAdvisor, but for companies. So anybody that's worked for you or interviewed for you or currently works for you can write on write some blurb about what you were like. But you can manage your own Glassdoor page and you can put photos up and you can respond to people's comments and all that sort of stuff. And as that gets more widely used, and let's be honest, social media gets used all the time, people will be able to see that actually you are visible and you do some good stuff. And the other thing is also word of mouth, and it's your employees. So if you tell your employees and you do great things for them and you respond to what they want, so if they all decide that their holiday is not very good and you could give them more, and then they'll go and tell all their mates down the pub that you're a great employer. And where it's locally, like it's an industrial estate somewhere, that works really well because that gets everybody else who works on that industrial estate looking into your company as a place to work because you offer all these great benefits and you've got loads of great employees that are really happy there.
Okay. And people always talk about employer branding. What is that?
That's it, really. So if you go back to my point about Google and Virgin, it's all about the brand. And so they've got a great brand anyway. And so what they really want is a brand to say that we are a great employer for these reasons. And it's what are those reasons? And I think, we did some work really recently for a chocolate factory, and they had an amazing brand, and but their employees didn't really believe it. So we worked with their employees to get them to understand what that meant to them, and we translated that into an employer brand. So the fact that they're fair trade and all that sort of thing, the fact that they're like that, and they pay more than the minimum wage for their employees, so they're getting the message out there that actually this is part of their brand, and they have a big culture shift where people can be promoted internally. They have all their internal values which actually mean something. It's not just something that they invented and say, oh yeah, we say this but we don't really do it. It is actually real. And that all really contributes and does help to employer branding.
Okay. Claire, what are the typical barriers are you finding at the moment for people accepting job offers?
Gosh. So I think that some employers haven't reacted quickly enough to the market as it is at the moment, where there is a candidate shortage. And so what they're doing is using the same process that they were, prior to COVID. And those processes sometimes can be a little bit clunky and a little bit slow. I think employers need to make fast decisions when there's a lack of candidates in the market. It's absolutely vital that you don't have someone hanging on and give your competition the chance to make an offer while they're waiting. And I also think that it's essential that companies have a really slick process to engage, or recruitment agencies have a really slick process to engage. If a candidate is looking for a role and they have multiple choices, and then they start to register or start to go through an application with an employer and it's clunky and difficult, again, they will just move on if there's 15 other jobs that they could apply for. So, I think it's a combination of engagement and easy engagement, and process and decision making.
Yeah, I've just got to jump on that point, because everything Claire says is absolutely right. And I think if you go back to even my examples of Google used to do a 12-stage interview process, and that they even got rid of that, and they accepted that was just ridiculous, making people jump through those hoops. And people would jump through them because they wanted to get Google on their CV and they wanted to work there. But there's a danger now that people will they'll do a quick process but not a good process. And I think you can still do a good recruitment process, but you just need to do it faster. And Claire's right. I think that if you leave people hanging on, the candidate gets fed up anyway, and they don't see you as a great place to work anymore. And really somebody else has given them a better experience. They feel that they want to work in an organization when they walk through the door, and then when they leave, they're really excited about it. And if they get the offer, they're going to take it. You then make them do 3 more interview processes that really aren't interviews. It's just because they want to sound them out. They're just going to lose the will. And I think the market has changed, and there's this fear of just recruiting anybody, and I don't think you should do that. I think you should actually try and find the right people, but I think you need to do, as Claire said, a much slicker process and faster, because if you try and leave it a month, you're going to lose your first choice straight away.
So what does a good recruitment process look like? Claire?
Yes. It's robust and gathers the correct information. So, you've got to define what you really need. I think a lot of companies say, oh, we want to replace this person, and the job description is 5 years old and they haven't looked at that role and it's evolved. So it's about defining exactly what they need, engaging in a way that that is useful for the candidate and right for the market. Progressing them through that interview process quickly, like Richard said, but with a quality. So you need to have that defined process in, and then making that fast decision, because in this market, you cannot hang around.
Okay. Richard, just coming back to something you mentioned a minute ago. So you said about there is a danger there that people want to recruit quickly and just to fill a role. What are the risks of doing that rather than waiting up for the right person?
I completely understand it. I completely get it, that why people do it, because they have a position. It's been open for a while. They need someone to do it. Everybody else is working harder, and people are basically doing that job, and they are not getting paid for it because you've got this open vacancy. So there's this tendency just to get anybody who kind of might work or even won't work into that role, just so that someone's doing it. The danger is that if you get somebody, they might not fit with everybody else. They might be really, they're just not got the personality for it. And we talk about will and skill all the time. So if someone's got the will to do it, then that's good. If someone doesn't have the will to do it, then you're just on a hide to nothing. If they've got the skill to do it, and they can do the role really, really well, that's great. But the tendency is that they probably won't have it because you're just plucking a pair of legs and a pair of arms out that you think is going to do this job. And then everybody else will train them, and they won't get it. They'll need multiple points of contact and touch points over the next 6 months to try and get them up to speed. They won't get there, and then you as a manager will have to terminate their employment, and then you've got to go and replace them, and you've got to do the whole thing again, and that gets expensive, not just in terms of like the recruitment cost, but the time that all that's taken. And then everybody else that's working with them just gets really despondent because they're fed up, and yet again another person hasn't worked out, and ultimately it's your fault, and your employees are right because you haven't done a process that's good enough. And you can't blame everybody else that they haven't been supported, because they definitely have. They just don't have the capability to do the job because you didn't actually assess that at the interview stage.
Okay. So obviously about 10 years ago, mission statements were talked about a lot, and now people are talking about values. Should they be used when you're recruiting?
I think mission statements are, personally, I think mission statements, I understand why people have them, because they think it's the thing to do. I think they're a bit old hat. I think they were very 1990s. They might work, you know, at least it kind of says what it does on the tin, I suppose, in some way, but not everybody really goes with it. And some of them are so bland, they're meaningless, and they're just a bit blur. Whereas I think that's definitely been replaced by values. And I think values, as you know, when I first started in HR, values was like one of those things that we talked about, but no one really believed it. But I think genuine values are things that evolve. If you asked what the values were, everyone's going to look at you really blankly. But if you talk about culture, and you talk about why you work in this organization, what's good about it, what's indifferent, why it's better than everybody else, the values are actually there, and that all you need to do is just pull those together and have them in somewhere where it's written down that people can live and breathe it. And I think it's really easy as an employer, because if one of your values, as ours is to be supported and be supportive, then actually you want everybody to be like that. So when you recruit people, that's one of your key values. So you're going to test that at the interview stage. When they start, you would expect them to be able to be welcoming the support they're being given from their colleagues. And when they're well into their engagement with you and into their employment, you want them to support everybody else. So that's just one example, but I think that's where it's real. And that would make me want to work for an organization if that was, as obviously I did. And that was an organization where that was one of their key values. If one of their key values was, we're going to work you to the bone and we're not going to give you any time off and all that, then yeah, that might work for some people, but that wouldn't work for me.
Fair enough. Claire, I'm seeing all over LinkedIn at the moment polls about whether or not you should put salary on a job advert. What are your opinions on this?
Gosh, well, my opinions may differ from some people, because obviously I work in a recruitment company rather than an end employer. But I think it's vital to put, if not a specific salary, a salary banding on, because if you are not prepared to pay over a certain amount, then you need to let people know that, so that they don't waste their time applying for a role that they would never accept based on money. So, and I know statistically, the job adverts with salaries on get a much higher rate of interest and application. So the candidate pool is saying that they agree with that.
Okay. And if there's, sorry, Richard, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that I think one of the reasons why people don't want to put the salaries on is because they're paying the current employees less. So they're paying their current employee 35 grand, but they know they can't recruit anybody for 35 grand. So they're going to have to go to 40. So they know that, but they don't want to put that on the advert, because then the people that are working for them will see it. But I go with Claire's point that actually, why would you apply for a job where you don't know the salary? That's the minimum requirement that you would want to know, isn't it? And that, in my day, we were, it's conditioned when I was at school that when you went for an interview, you didn't ask about salary, you didn't ask about holidays or benefits until about the third interview. Whereas now, I think it's completely changed. I think the next generation want all that sort of stuff. They want to know exactly what they're going to be earning. They want to know, life's expensive, and they want to know how much holiday they're going to have and all of that. And the more that you can offer, and whether or not that's a suite of things, like you can buy holiday or something like that, because not everybody wants 30 days holiday. So if you offer 25, but you can buy 5 or something like that, and other benefits that they could opt into, then great. Then that you got more chance of getting people looking at it and thinking, oh, that looks like a company I'd like to work for. And I think holiday is important. I know you talked about salary, but holiday is a big perk. And if you're only paying 20 days holiday, I don't think you're going to get as many applicants as if you're offering 25. personally. And it's the same with salary. I think the higher the salary, and you've got to pay above market rate, haven't you, to get the right person? I think you're just paying market rate. Why would anybody leave their current employer and come work for you? It's got to be a hook somewhere.
What if you can't pay market rate though?
Well, I know that's where you top up your benefits. So, you know, we know this because we've just been through this massive pandemic. There's lots and lots of companies out there that don't have the money, and they want to, but you can scale it up, and you can say that, you know, you're going to join on this, and then when you get these skills, we're going to train you in this area, and once you've got those skills, I'll give you a salary increase to this, and then if you move up the next level or you do X, Y, and Z, then you'll get this. And so you're not parting with that money straight away, and then it's the benefits. And, you know, people like time off, people like additional benefits that they don't currently get. And whilst money is definitely a pull and a driver and all those sorts of things, there are other things that you can help attract people with, and career prospects and all that sort of stuff, not just the money today. And I know plenty of people that go backwards to go forwards.
I find it interesting as well, Richard, that employers would not advertise that salary because they're paying their current employees less money, but surely they should value those loyal people that know the job inside out and potentially know other roles in the business more than an unknown entity that all they've engaged with is for an hour's interview or maybe, you know, 2 interview process. It's an interesting mindset that you would bring an unknown entity into your business that doesn't have any training or more money. I think, you know, employers need to think about that.
Well, this is my point all the time, that we don't pay people what they're deserving. We know we're not paying them what they're deserving, and then they leave. And then when they leave, not only do we have to up the salary by $5,000, we have to pay a $7,000 recruitment charge on that. And plus, like you said, they're an unknown entity. They might not work out. And then so you've lost someone who's really good. You've exploited a little bit for quite a long time. The best thing you could do for them is to, I don't want to say share the love, but you know what I mean? Like
share the love, why not?
And you're demonstrating to them that you do value them. And there's this well, in my day, it was, if you wanted to get a decent pay rise, you had to leave the company and you had to go somewhere else. Whereas I don't think it's like that anymore. I think companies should be actually valuing people. And like you said, Claire, this is the value that we see you at, and this is what we should be paying you.
Richard, you mentioned about career progression and opportunities. So when is it the right time to promote someone internally, and when should you actually go externally to hire?
Well, I personally think you need a healthy mix of both. I think you need a good mix of external hires, because they come in with some new ideas and there are things that you've not done before. They've got experience of other companies that actually may be competitors, and they come in with some great stuff. I think it's a really good message to promote people internally for those that want to do it and can do it. The thing we see all the time is that we promote people, don't we? And then they do okay, so we promote them again, and they do okay, we promote them again, they can't do it. So we have lots and lots of people in quite senior positions who have been over promoted and they just can't do the role, but it's so hard to put them back. So I always say that really this is all about we have a job role, don't we, or job profile or job description or whatever you call it, and linked to that job description we should really have competencies, so that in order for you to do this role, these are the things that you should do well. I talk about this all the time, and if you can do this well, then you can do that job. And what we should annex to that is training and access to training. So if you don't have the competencies to fulfill the role today, what we're going to do is we're going to give you this training to give you the competencies, and then once you've got the competencies, you can do the job. And when you recruit somebody, and like Claire said, they're untested, they're not going to have all the competencies, or they're unlikely to have all the competencies that you need to do the job. So in that job that you've recruited for, you give them the access to the training so they can do it, and then they're doing that role successfully. If they make noises that they want to be promoted to the next level, I would then get the job profile and the competencies for the next level up and say, right, okay, well, we're going to give you the training to get you to the competency level, so that when we come to promote you and you can do those, you demonstrate you have the competencies to do the role, and then we're going to promote you into the job, and they've got more chance of being successful. It's also a good message as well. And what I don't like, and this is just personal preference, I don't like when people put out an internal vacancy, particularly, especially if it's like a team leader role in a team, and they ask the team to apply for it. So it's a team of 5, there 4 of them will apply for it, 3 of them won't get it, and they'll be very disgruntled. And the one that gets it, it's like herding cats for the first 6 months until they've proven themselves. Whereas actually, if you look at one-to-ones and you look at appraisals, and you talk to them about career aspirations, and you talk to them about, actually, if you want to do it, you need to go for this training to give you these competencies. Some people accept they're not there yet, and that's good for you, because you can tell them that, and you can say, you're not there today, but we're building you up, and we think in a couple of years you'll get there, which is manageable and great. And the people that get the role, everybody accepts that they've got it because they can do it, not because their face fits or they're popular and all that usual stuff that comes with that kind of thing. And that stops all the disgruntlement. It also really helps with the internal promotions, and it helps people being more successful. And we've all been there where we've over promoted people and it hasn't worked, and it's a very difficult conversation to have.
So what do you do when you've over promoted someone?
I don't. I think the fact is, if you have over promoted them, you do have a couple of options. You've got to either go and get them to do that job properly, and if it's not going to work because it's just not their bag, you have that conversation about their options. And the worst thing to do is show it as a failure. And it's actually quite a positive thing that you've done it and you've given it a go, but it hasn't worked for you today. But you can still talk about long-term career aspirations, and you can say, look, it hasn't quite worked, but what we want to do is put you back to a role that you're doing really well in, and you're excelling in, and you enjoy doing. And we're going to then give you the access to training. We're going to help you get there again in the future, but we want to make sure next time it works. Or it could be they do a sideways move, because you promoted them for a reason. So it is either that they were superb in the job they were doing, or you saw something that could be quite useful to you, but that something could be more or better utilized in another part of the business. So there are other options, and I just think that it's just a very hard conversation. No one wants to feel like a failure, so you can't make them feel like that.
Claire, obviously when sometimes internal promotions just isn't an option and you need to go externally, and one reason that people might not want to is because recruiting is expensive and the fees can be quite high. But what are people actually paying for when they're paying agency fees?
Yeah, so they are paying for a proven process that the agency has, but then talented people work, but we have that proven process, but we go out and meet with the client, and within that framework, we tailor that to exactly what the client needs. So we will sit down and we will understand what that client's requirements, priorities are, and then we will create that service just for the client. So they're paying for that process, but they're also paying for expertise in that particular area. So we have divisions that work in different areas. And when our customers come to us, they'll be working with an experienced and fully trained consultant in that specific area. So it's about that networking. The business specializes in that area, and the client is getting something that they wouldn't be able to do within their own company.
Okay, I've had I was speaking to another agency a couple of weeks ago, and they said that they're really struggling to get the same number of people for shortlists and stuff. Is that something that you're finding as well? That people are expecting too many in a final shortlist?
Yeah, so what we're experiencing is just a shortage of candidates right across the board. So whether that's for permanent recruitment or for temporary recruitment, we're experiencing difficulty in getting the skills that our clients require. We're also experiencing a lack of commitment from the candidates that do engage with us. So we will get people that will engage, go through the process, but then they don't move forward to actually accepting a role. So yeah, it is a very challenging candidate market at the moment. I mean, for recruiters, there's always a challenge at any specific time, whether it's candidate as it is now, or you'll have a shortage of clients for whatever reason. But this is a particularly interesting time. I haven't known a candidate market like this in my 20 plus years in recruitment.
Wow, okay. So obviously we've spoken a lot about speed as well over the last 25 minutes. What is the right sort of timings for interviewing? So is there a set time frame that you should have first stage, second stage by, or does it depend on the role or the company?
Yeah, I mean, with the way things are at the moment, what I would recommend is as fast as possible, so that you cut out any contact with your competition or with, other employers that might be interested in that candidate. And candidates want an answer as quickly as possible. If they decide they want to secure a job, it needs to be a process that doesn't take more than a week, I would say, in the current market. So depending on whether it's a 1 interview process or a 2 interview process, what we do at Talented People is encourage our clients to actually already pre-book interviews. So they may give us a job to work on, and while we are taking that job, we will discuss the benefit of, let's book your first interviews on Monday or Tuesday next week, let's book your second on Thursday, and then you've got Friday to make decisions, because it's really great to have that answer for the candidate before they go off on the weekend. And you know, recruiters work weekends. They might get 3 other calls that weekend for work starting on Monday. You ring them on Monday with the decision, and they've already accepted something else because you dragged your heels. So as fast as humanly possible at the moment, otherwise you will miss out on the opportunity to take on good people.
Years and years ago, I worked with a recruiter, and they completely understood our business. And we used quite a lot of contractors, so they would come in and do 6 months piece of work. And the recruiter understood us so well, we didn't even interview. We allowed them to do it, and they would just get people on site. So I think and that's unusual. It depends, doesn't it? It depends on your relationship with the recruiter. And I think if you've got hundreds and hundreds of recruiters you keep calling upon, they're never going to know your business as well as a couple of them would get to know you quite intimately. That's what I think.
Yeah. I would say that it's a mistake for clients to engage with multiple recruiters. If you want to profile yourself as an employer of choice in the local market, really you want to pick an agency that represents you, and potentially you would do joint branding so that the quality becomes synonymous with that employer. I mean, obviously, if you're doing volume recruitment on the temporary side, you may need to have 1 or 2 or maybe 3 in this market where the candidates are difficult to find. But you only get back from a relationship what you put in. So if you don't engage with your recruiter, and if you already think, wow, it's too expensive and they're not going to do a great job, you're not in the right mindset to get a great service. Because what we do is very highly skilled, can't be done within the employer, and it adds massive value to the client. If you get the right person who stays with you, that is a huge asset, and recruitment gives you that.
So I know lots of companies have internal recruiters, and they use their internal resources to be able to find roles. What are the benefits of using an external agency over internal resources?
I think lots of internal recruiters do a really great job, but I think that what they do can be quite diluted. So when you engage with a recruiter and you give them a requirement, a job or multiple jobs, you are guaranteed that they are going to put all of their time and effort into filling that when they take that role on. They'll agree timeframes with you to work through and hopefully interview, so you know the process is in stone. Because you're dealing with a specialist recruiter in that area, they will have a great network of people. They will know who the competition is to have a candidate pool within. So, you know, you are paying for that expertise. You are paying for that great service.
Okay. Just going back to interviewing for just a minute, Richard, what's the best way to structure an interview?
Well, you got to find out what you want to know. I think that's the big thing, isn't it? There's no point in just having a cozy coffee chat with somebody and you know, chatting about stuff that's irrelevant. I think you've got a structured interview is a bit more competency led. It's a bit more situation based. And you know, I've done interviews for years, and someone's, you know, asking somebody, give me a time when, you know, I think they're the worst kinds of interviews, because you really aren't. It's not a two-way flow. And I think if you really want to understand how people operate under pressure or something, you would say to them, this is a really high pressurized environment. The phone's constantly ringing all the time. You've got multiple priorities running. The day just runs away with you. So how do you think you're going to cope with that? And have you ever worked in an environment like that before? And then, because that's a bit more relaxed, that kind of style of interviewing, they're going to think of 20 different examples straight away, and they're going to have a much more flowy kind of interview. And but don't forget, people can, I think personally, people who interview really well because they do a lot of interviewing. So it doesn't mean that they're necessarily great to do the job. So you have to bear that in mind. So I think there are elements of psychometrics that you should be looking at as well. I'm a massive fan of things like Thomas International, SHL, for example. Belbin works quite well as well. And if you can add that into your process, and you can do that early on, And actually, that's about their psyche. That'll give you some additional questions to ask them. So you'll understand already where their strengths are, certainly within their personality, and where their weaknesses are. And you can challenge those and ask those specific questions rather than asking things that actually you've got a good vibe that they're going to be quite good at that. Because if they've worked in a call center or something, you're probably going to be all right talking on the phone. So why even ask that question? You may as well ask something else. So that, yeah, but there's millions of ways to do it, and there's no right or wrong. And assessment centers are used quite a lot as well. And I think, I don't know what that's going to be like now in this environment, but assessment centers are quite a good way to see people actually how they react on the job. And there's also simulator organizations there as well now, where they, particularly for senior roles like managing director roles, or certainly C-level roles, you can actually do a simulated almost like interview, and they do a load of research for a couple of days, and they do 3 hours, and they're actually on their computer, and you can see what they're doing, and you can see how they're typing and constructing emails, and you can have people calling them, and you can see how they react. And whilst that's really good, it might just be a little bit too heavy. And so there's lots and lots of options out there, but I think you've got to find out at the end of that interview, you've got to be happy that you've asked everything you wanted to ask, and that you're confident that they're a yes or a no, or a very strong maybe.
And how important is team fit in making a decision?
I think team fit is really important. I think that's where your values come into it, because there is a danger, obviously, that we recruit in our own image, so we end up having lots and lots of little versions of you, right? But it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think that people have to work together and be able to work together. And if you've got a lot of conflict, it's never going to be healthy. And people are different. And we whilst we accept that, and we are diverse and all that sort of stuff, that's great. I agree that you can still pull diversity in and still have team fit. And but I think you all have to have the same like end goals to a degree, that you want to be there, you want to do a good job, you want to do it in this way, you're happy to work in this environment, in this setting for that manager. And if all that works, and that's a good fit, if you get people who just aren't happy or just aren't engaged in that, then they're not going to fit, and they're not going to work, and they're going to go.
Claire, what do you think companies should be doing? So when they offer a candidate, sometimes the candidate might have 3 months notice, and then it's 3 months between the offer to them starting. Do you think there's something that should happen in between that, some kind of communication?
Absolutely, yeah. It's vital that employers or agencies would stay in contact with that person. 3 months is such a long time for another opportunity to be presented to that candidate. So depending on the role, I would suggest that every week or every other week would be appropriate, just to touch base. It doesn't necessarily have to be, have you been approached about another role, but literally just a touch base, or a company newsletter, or a message saying, we're really looking forward to you joining the team. I would say it's absolutely vital at the moment in that kind of notice period.
And then Richard, for the induction process, I speak to clients all the time, and they talk about, they watch a health and safety video on day one, and we show them where the toilets are, and we show them where the fire point is. And then by the end of the week, they've had a review meeting. Is that an induction process, or what should an induction process actually look like?
Well, it is some form of induction process. Whether it's a good one, I don't know. I did an induction for a company where I'd worked there, and I'd been there 9 months before they invited me to my one-day induction and told me where the toilets were. But thankfully, I'd found the toilets prior to that. So no, I don't. I think the induction is such a long period of time. I think to say that it's a day or a week or a month or even the probation period is untrue. I think the induction is really long, and it takes a long time for people to get embedded into a firm and to feel comfortable and to feel like it's home and all that. And that yes, it's great. They've got to watch the fire safety video and stuff because they have to. That's not something that you're doing because it's a extracurricular and it's a really good thing to do. So the induction is think about the probation period first, and break that down into what happens on the first day, who they need to talk to in the first week, how they're going to get to know the wider people as well, and the stakeholders in the first month. And then how are you going to do that feedback to them regularly over that period? Because if you don't talk to them for the whole 3 months and you get to the end of it and you say it's not working out, it's going to come as a massive shock. And if you talk to them regularly about the perception or the issues that you're having, or some areas that you're concerned about, you can actually fix those very, very quickly in that period of time. And obviously not everyone works out, but you would hope that they would. And if they're willing to adapt and listen to what you're going to say, and if you've recruited the right way to your values, etc., then they should be able to do that quite well. And then even post so when you confirm somebody in post, I don't know how often this really happens, and you say congratulations, you've passed your probation period, you might give them a pay rise or something. There's a tendency just to forget about them and just think, well, they're part of the furniture now, so I'm just going to leave them to it. And I certainly wouldn't recommend that either. I think that you have to continue that well into 6 months, and then they go into the usual one-to-ones that everybody else in your team should be having every 12 weeks.
How would you know if an employee or a new starter isn't enjoying it, or an existing employee is looking for another job? I
think that really people are engaged, and sometimes you can tell engagement levels quite easily, and there's telltale signs all the time, isn't there? There's a lot of sporadic absence, they turn up late, they're the usual ones. There's also like apathy, or the passive aggressive kind of behavior where they say they're going to do things and then they don't, and they come up with loads of reasons why they're missing deadlines, and they're just missing deadlines. And the engagement level is falling, and I think you can re-engage people, and everybody goes for a process where they're a bit fed up, and January's a classic example. They're a bit fed up and they don't really want to be here, and then want to look for another job. But actually, if you're good as an employer, or you're a good manager, you can invigorate people again, and they can re-engage, and then they're really excited, and people look for jobs. It's a fact of life. And some people just go and do interviews every now and then because they want to do interviews, because they feel like they still need to maintain that skill level for whatever comes around the corner, and that's a reality. So if somebody's willing to leave, you think somebody's not happy, my advice would be to talk to them and address it, and not like pin them to the wall and ask them if they're leaving or anything like that, and certainly in a non-aggressive way, but just see if there's anything you can do for them and how they're feeling. And and it could be anything. It could be external factors that you don't know about and they're not willing to share openly, or it could be the fact that they're not getting on with their colleagues, and you can fix that relatively quickly as well.
Should those conversations happen only when you're feeling like someone might be disengaged, or should they be just a regular occurrence?
I think you have to do this at one-to-ones, and I've been a huge advocate of this. I'm one of the few people who say that the appraisal's kind of had its day. I think you definitely have it, but I think what you talk about at an appraisal is more about career progression and long-term plans. But at one-to-ones, you talk about the general feel of people and how they're, what more you can do for them, and whether or not they're happy in the role they're doing, where they see themselves in the future, and you can look at that on an annual basis. But I think your one-to-one could be 12 weekly, or it could be even 6 months or weekly. It depends on the role that the person's fulfilling, and it's not necessarily a one-way stream. It has to be, they have to tell you and give you feedback as well, because everybody feels like they want to have a voice.
Claire, I just wanted to ask you about counter offers. Are you seeing that they are happening more regularly now because it's such a candidate-led market? And what are the risks, do you think, of people making counter offers?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of counter offers. It's really gone up, and we've had a lot of people that have taken those counter offers and pulled out of the engaging with the new company. It's really interesting, because as the employer, you want to retain that person. You want to retain that skill and experience that you have built with that person over the years that they've worked for you. So I can completely understand why employers counter offer. But from the candidate's point of view, they have got to a stage where, for whatever reason, they are no longer happy, and they are motivated enough to go out, register with an agency, or engage with an employer direct and go to interview and get to offer stage. They need to ask themselves, why why am I wanting to move away? What are the reasons? And is that reason fixable? Because if it's something like culture or the management, it's highly unlikely that is going to change. If there is nowhere for you to be promoted to because you're working in a small company, but you're ambitious, even if they throw another £5,000 at you, it's just a holding pattern, because you are going to leave at some stage. And why would you stay if you don't have anywhere to go? So, you know, it's a really interesting conundrum, and there are two sides to that. You know, I think I would recommend that both clients and candidates put some deep thought before they either counter offer or accept that counter offer, because you need to understand the reasons why this has happened.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Richard, can people recruit for a role that isn't actually vacant yet? So someone's not working out, they know they're probably going to make a difficult decision in the next couple of months. Can they start recruiting early?
Well, there's a couple. Well, I get it. So you've got somebody who's, I completely understand it. Loads of people have been there. You've got somebody who's working for you. You need someone to do that job because that job has to be done. But the person who's doing it is hopeless, or you're just not getting on with them, and you just really you've had enough of them and you want them gone. But you can't sack them and then wait 3 months for somebody else to come and do the job. I completely understand the temptation to go and recruit someone first, and then when you've recruited that person, secured them, sack the person that you've got. I get it. Yeah, morally, it's probably completely wrong, but actually, I understand it from a business point of view why you'd want to do it. But there's loads of things you can do with that person. You could put an exit package together for them if you wanted to, and tell them how you're feeling and be really honest with them. And you can, we're protected. You can have protected conversation because the law allows you to do that in certain instances. And then you can be really frank. And if they're really unhappy and they don't want to be there, you saying to them, look, I just want you to ride out the next 3 months while I find somebody else. And at the end of it, I'm going to give you X, and that X can be an ex gratia payment, so tax-free amount. They might jump at that. And for those 3 months, I might work really, really hard while you're recruiting somebody else. That's probably the best way to do it. But you could reassess the role and say that you don't think this role's the right role that you want, and actually maybe that's why it's not working out. So you could think that actually we need something else, and this is a different role that we want, and then you can go and recruit for a different role, and then you can make a decision in the future as to whether or not the current role is still going to be in as part of the new structure. So there's loads of things that you can do. The danger of recruiting while you still have a person looking, as well, as Claire will probably tell you, is that person might apply for their own job. And then you're in a bit of a pickle.
We're just coming up to 10:45, but I've got one final question for Claire, if that's okay. Do you see, obviously furloughs now come to an end, do you think that that's going to have an impact on the market as it is currently?
I ideally hope so. I'm hoping that that will make a difference. I mean, in an ideal world, all of those people will go back to work and their jobs will be fine. But I think realistically, there will be some people that, now that the furlough is finished, that the employer has decided that because they've done without them for so long, that actually that role is not really essential to the business. And I'm hoping that those people will be job seeking in the market, and it will help us to, be able to place for clients. That's my dear hope. Let's see, because I haven't noticed a huge difference yet. But it might be that people, want to get their ducks in a row and work out what their options are. I'm hoping there'll be an influx.
Don't forget that furlough allowed you to, if you're on furlough, you could go and work somewhere else. So many of those people that are currently on furlough could actually be in alternative employment. So if the plug gets pulled on their furloughed role, it doesn't make any difference to them because they're already in the job. That's quite likely. I can't remember what the figures were. I think there's 1 million people who are still on furlough or something. There's 1 million vacancies. You think it should all match up, but I don't think it's going to work like that.
If only life worked like that.
I know, it's not that simple, really.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for that. We're at 10:45 now, so we've finished bang on time. If anyone has any questions that you'd like to speak to Claire or Richard after today, if you just give us a shout, and we can arrange some calls or some meetings. But thank you all for joining.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll be sending a recording out soon.